When I came out and got engaged to a woman, my mom faked a heart attack, my dad prayed I'd die, and my uncle called my fiancée a homewrecker. They cut me off until the wedding invite hit their mailbox with "No bigots allowed" in gold foil. I was standing in my tiny kitchen in Scranton, Pennsylvania, staring at the stack of pastel wedding invitations I just sealed, when my phone started blowing up like a 5-alarm fire. At first I thought maybe my fiancée, Jenna, had sent another picture of the venue mock-up. But when I opened my messages, everything inside me dropped. My cousin Lauren had posted another meme, this time a warped, ugly filter of our engagement photo, with the caption, "When you ruin your whole family for attention." It already had laughing reactions from half my relatives. I hadn't even sent the invitations yet. They had no idea those cards were sitting inches from my hand, ready to go out. Then a notification popped from the family group chat I didn't even know I was still in. I'd been silent in it for weeks, ever since the night I told them I was engaged to a woman, and my entire world cracked in one dinner sitting. They thought they'd kicked me out. Turns out someone forgot to remove my number from one device, because messages were pouring in 19, 20, 25, one after another. My Uncle Gary, "Don't open that invite if it comes. Return to sender. Don't encourage sin." My Aunt Maria, "We just need to pray harder. God can still reach her before she does something she can't undo." My father, of course, wrote, "I hope she realizes what she's doing before she destroys herself." That was rich, considering this man once looked me in the eye, in front of Jenna, and said, "We'll pray you die before the wedding." He didn't whisper it. He didn't hesitate. He said it like he was blessing me before bed. And now my phone lit up with a new message, one that made my hands shake so hard I had to brace myself against the counter. My mother, the same mother who threw herself on the floor at Olive Garden like we were in some soap opera meltdown, clutching her chest and screaming, "You're killing me!" When I said the words, "I'm engaged," she texted, "If you send that invitation, you are officially dead to us. Don't test me." Dead to us. That was when something inside me, something that had been beaten down for years, flipped. For the first time since the engagement, since the dinner meltdown, since being erased from my own family's life like I'd never existed, I felt calm. Ice cold calm. Because the invitations weren't a question. They were already sealed. But the part my family didn't know, the part that made my heart pound even harder, was that inside each envelope wasn't just a wedding invite. It was something else. Something I had discovered by accident 2 weeks ago. Something that changed everything I thought I knew about why my family reacted the way they did. And tonight, they were all about to receive it. I stacked the envelopes neatly, tied them with the twine ribbon Jenna picked, and walked them out to the mailbox. My hands didn't even shake as I pulled the metal handle open. But before I dropped them in, my phone buzzed again. This time with a notification that froze me where I stood. A direct message. From someone I never expected to hear from. Someone who had every reason to stay silent. Someone who knew the one truth I hadn't told Jenna yet, and who claimed my family's meltdown had nothing to do with me loving a woman. I stared at the first line of the message, my breath gone. "I think you should know what really started all this." And then the screen went black. When people ask what my family is like, I never know where to start. Some families fight, some nitpick, some guilt trip. Mine? They act like they're auditioning for a religious cult documentary. Every holiday felt like a sermon. Every conversation circled back to sin, shame, or which relative wasn't walking with the Lord. Growing up in Scranton, I learned early that love in my house came with conditions. If you made straight A's, Dad bragged about you. If you didn't, he prayed loudly in the living room for your weak spirit. If you wore a tank top, Mom said you were inviting demons. If you laughed too loud, she warned that pride comes before the fall. So when I realized at 19 that I liked girls, I buried it so deep I didn't even let the thought form in full sentences. I dated men I felt nothing for. I went to Bible study. I played the role so well I almost convinced myself I could keep it up forever. Then I met Jenna. She flew into my life like a lightning strike, bright, warm, grounding. We met at a 4th of July barbecue my coworker invited me to. I hadn't even wanted to go. But Jenna walked in wearing denim shorts and holding a tray of lemon bars. And for the first time in my life, I felt something shift. She talked to me like she'd known me for years, laughed at everything, and didn't look away when I froze from nerves. I kept telling myself it couldn't mean anything. But she kept showing up, inviting me on hikes, dropping off blueberry muffins on days she accidentally baked too many, texting me good morning and good night without fail. 6 months later, she kissed me outside a movie theater while snow fell in slow, lazy flakes. It should have been terrifying. It was the first moment in my life that felt like mine. I didn't tell my family for almost 2 years. I knew exactly what would happen. I'd seen how they treated my cousin Daniel when he came out. They prayed over him, cut him off financially, and told the entire family he was possessed. So when Daniel stopped coming to holidays, no one questioned it. But Jenna wanted a future, and I wanted one with her. We moved in together quietly, me telling my parents I was rooming with a coworker to save money. They bought it without question. They never came to see the apartment, never asked much about my life outside of church events. It was easier that way. Then Jenna proposed. On a Wednesday, in our living room, with takeout boxes open on the coffee table and candles she forgot she lit melting unevenly on the mantel. My heart felt too big for my chest. I said yes before she finished asking. And for a few weeks I lived in that glow. I let myself imagine a wedding where my family wasn't a factor. I pictured walking down an aisle, Jenna's face at the end of it. Pictured joy. Pictured peace. Then I told them. We were at Olive Garden. My mother had insisted on dinner because we don't see you enough. And I thought maybe, just maybe, they were softening. I rehearsed my words in the mirror for days. When I finally said, I'm engaged, my mother's fork dropped like she'd been shot. When I added, to Jenna, the entire table exploded. The heart attack performance. My father's prayer of death. My uncle shouting that Jenna was a homewrecker. My cousin giggling while she filmed it on her phone. They erased me that night, and I thought that was the whole story. But the message I'd received, the one that claimed my family's meltdown had nothing to do with me loving a woman, would blow my entire understanding of that night apart. And it started long before Jenna ever entered my life. I didn't open the message that night. My phone had died right as I read the first line, and honestly, part of me was relieved. I wasn't sure I wanted to know what really started all this. I already had enough to carry. But the next morning, that uneasy feeling in my gut dragged me out of bed before Jenna woke up. I brewed coffee, sat at our wobbly thrift store table, and finally opened the message. It was from Daniel, my cousin, the one who came out, got spiritually torched by my family, and disappeared from every gathering like he'd been erased. We hadn't spoken in 3 years. His first line hit like a punch. I'm sorry I've been silent, but what your parents are doing isn't about you being gay. Not really. Not really. That phrase kept repeating in my head. He kept going. I should have told you sooner. I didn't because I was ashamed. But you need to know something. When I came out, your dad told the family that I tried to recruit him, that I confessed things to him, that I was dangerous. None of it was true. He made it up because he needed someone to blame. I read that message 4 times, then a 5th. Then I put my phone down like it had burned me. My father, the same man who weaponized scripture like a blade, lied about his own nephew to keep the family's image intact. And they all swallowed it because he was the spiritual leader. I knew he was controlling. I knew he was cruel. But manufacturing a story that destructive, that deliberate, I felt sick. Daniel's message kept going. There's more, but I don't want to send it on here. If you want the truth, the real reason, call me. That hung in the air like smoke. I didn't call. Not yet. Because while my brain tried to process what Daniel said, life kept moving. My family didn't slow down their attacks. If anything, their behavior escalated. My aunt started demanding Jenna directly, calling her a predator, saying she had taken advantage of my confused phase. Jenna blocked her, but the damage was done. She didn't cry, but I saw her shoulders shake when I hugged her from behind that night. My mother left me 10 voicemails in 2 days. In one of them, she said she had picked a black dress for my funeral. and she wasn't joking. In another, she said she hoped my shame followed me into the next life. Then Jenna found out my cousin Lauren had posted screenshots from my private Instagram. Pictures from a beach weekend Jenna and I took, and captioned them with, "Ocean trash." It was like they were competing to see who could be the cruelest. But the worst moment, the moment that pushed me out of shock and straight into something colder, came when my dad showed up at my job. I was walking back from lunch when I saw him standing outside the office doors, hands in pockets, staring at the building like he was considering setting it on fire. I froze, but he saw me instantly. He walked right up to me, leaned in so close I could smell the cheap coffee on his breath, and said in a voice low enough to stay off security mics, "You think this is all about your little choice? You really don't know anything, do you?" I stepped back. "What's that supposed to mean?" He smirked. Actually smirked. "You'll find out soon enough." Then he turned, walked to his truck, and drove off like he just dropped off a package. My stomach twisted. The message from Daniel. The hint from my dad. The family's total meltdown that felt wildly bigger than homophobia, bigger than anything that made sense. That night, I sat at the table with my phone in my hand, staring at Daniel's number, trying to steady myself. Because for the first time, I realized something terrifying. My family wasn't reacting to my engagement. They were reacting to something they thought I knew. Something they were terrified would come out. And I was about to hear exactly what that was. Daniel picked up on the first ring. He didn't even say hello. He breathed out hard, like he'd been holding his lungs tight for years and had finally let go. "I figured you'd call," he said. His voice sounded different, older, heavier. The last time I heard it, he'd been crying in my parents' driveway while my dad screamed scripture at him from the porch. Hearing him now reopened something raw inside me. "I need to know," I said. "What did you mean when you said all this wasn't about me being gay?" There was a beat of silence. Then he said, "This goes back 10 years. And it starts with your mom." My throat closed up. "My mom?" "She told the family I had approached your dad, that I admitted to having feelings for him. She said I threatened to tell people at church that he cheated on her." He paused. "I didn't, obviously. None of that happened. Not one word." I pressed my fingers to my temples, trying to swallow the nausea building. "Why would she say that?" "Because," Daniel said, voice tightening, "I wasn't the one who threatened that. Someone else was." My skin went cold. He took a shaky breath. "Your parents had a deal, unspoken, but everyone kind of knew. They both had friendships outside the marriage. Emotional cheating. Sometimes more, from what I gathered. They kept it quiet because they were terrified of church scandal." I felt the ground tilt. My parents? The marriage they preached about like it was divine perfection? The same people who taught classes about purity and commitment? Daniel continued. "They'd been fighting for months because your mom thought your dad was seeing someone regularly. Someone younger. Someone he was getting reckless about." He paused again, letting it sink in. I gripped my phone tighter. "Who?" He didn't soften it. "Your mom thought it was you." Everything in me froze. "What?" I whispered. "Your mom saw texts on his phone from an unknown number. Short messages. Lots of late-night ones. She was convinced he was having an affair with a younger woman. Around your age." "No," I said instantly, shaking my head even though he couldn't see. "No, Daniel, she would never." "She did," he cut in. "She absolutely did. I was there. I heard her screaming about it. She said your dad was lusting after someone who could be his daughter. She kept saying the woman's voice sounded like yours. Couldn't breathe. And your dad," Daniel said quietly, "didn't deny the affair. He just denied it was you." The room spun around me. My mother, my father, they had thought I wasn't even. I choked out. "I was living at home. I worked nights. I barely had a life then." "I know," Daniel said gently. "But your mom snapped. She became obsessed. She asked me to admit that I helped cover for him. She cornered me in the kitchen after a family dinner and said if I didn't tell her who the woman was, she'd make sure everyone knew what I was. That's why she made up the lies about me." I felt sick to my core. But here's the part you need to understand, Daniel said. Your parents think you know about it. They think someone told you, and that's why they exploded when you announced your engagement. They panicked. They thought you were going public with everything. What everything? He hesitated. Then he said the last thing I expected. The reason for all this, the texts, the fights, the breakdown, it wasn't another woman, okay? It wasn't an affair the way your mom thought. Then what was it? Daniel exhaled shakily, like he hated being the one to say this. Your dad wasn't cheating on your mom with a woman. The words hit like a slap. He was meeting with someone else. Someone he was terrified the family would find out about. And the texts your mom saw were code for those meetings. I felt my heart thrumming in my ears. Meetings for what? Daniel's voice dropped low, almost a whisper. For money, for control, for secrets. And your dad wasn't the only one involved. I swallowed hard. Then who? You, he said softly. It all ties back to you. And something your dad did a long time ago. Something he thought would stay buried. My entire body went cold. And that, Daniel said, is why they're so scared of you getting married. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. Daniel had dropped enough pieces to form an outline of something dark. But not enough to see the full picture. My parents thought I knew something. Something connected to money, secrets, and me. Something they believed I could expose. And the more I replayed their reactions. The meltdown at Olive Garden. The "you're killing me." The prayer that I die before the wedding. My dad showing up at my workplace like he was warning me off. It all felt less like religious panic and more like fear. Real fear. Of me. But I still didn't know why. While Jenna slept, curled up on her side, I sat at our kitchen table with a notebook in front of me, trying to put the pieces together like I was solving a crime scene. My parents think I know something. They think I might reveal it publicly. The wedding triggered something. My dad was having meetings that required secrecy. The messages my mom saw sounded like they came from someone my age. And the final piece. Daniel said the whole thing ties back to me. But how? I wasn't involved in anything. I wasn't hiding anything. I barely survived living under their roof, let alone had some secret role in whatever mess they created. Around 3 a.m., Jenna walked into the kitchen wearing one of my hoodies and sat next to me. She didn't ask questions. She just put her head on my shoulder. It almost broke me. She'd been catching strays from my family for weeks, and she still showed up for me without hesitation. I'm sorry, I whispered. For what? She murmured. You didn't sign up for any of this. She lifted her head. I signed up for you. Those 5 words steadied me more than anything Daniel said. When she went back to bed, I stared down at the notebook again. If my family was terrified of something coming out, then maybe something should come out. And that's when the idea for the invitations hit me hard and fast. Yes, I was sending actual wedding invitations. But each envelope also contained something my family didn't know existed. Something I'd stumbled on purely by accident. A copy of the bank statements I had found in an unlabeled folder in my mother's old desk drawer. The one she gave me last year when she updated the home office. The folder was stuck behind the drawers, sealed with a rubber band that snapped when I pulled it out. I had forgotten about that folder for months, until the night after Olive Garden. Something in me decided to look. And what I found didn't make sense at the time. Withdrawals done in cash, always under my name. Transfers labeled as education support. But I was never told about them. Payments to a private religious counseling center in New Jersey, made every month for almost 10 years. And my name listed again, and again, and again. I didn't understand it. I still didn't. But clearly my parents thought I did. So in each envelope, the wedding invitation and a photocopy of the most confusing, incriminating page. I included a handwritten note. I think you forgot to explain these. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. If their meltdown had been nuclear before, I was about to give them a reason to implode. As I packed the envelopes earlier that night, I told myself I just wanted answers. Clarity. To force them to talk. But as dawn crept through the blinds, painting the kitchen in gray light, I realized something else. This wasn't just about answers anymore. This was about accountability. This was about not letting them bury me out of fear, like they buried Daniel. This was about putting pressure exactly where they didn't want it. And as exhausted as I was, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control. But I didn't know yet, couldn't have known, that sending those papers would trigger a chain reaction none of us were prepared for. Because the second twist? The truth Daniel hadn't yet told me? It wasn't about money at all. It was about identity. And it was about to rip my understanding of myself and my family wide open. The fallout started 48 hours after the invitations hit their mailboxes. I woke up to 30 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a text from my mother that said only, "We need to talk. Now." I didn't respond. Instead, I called Daniel. He picked up with a sharp inhale. "They got the papers." "Yeah," I said. "And now my mom's acting like someone died." Daniel was quiet a moment. "Before they call you, you need to hear the rest." My stomach nodded. "Okay." He exhaled shakily. "Remember how I said your dad was having meetings? And how the texts were coded? And how your mom thought the girl he was meeting sounded like you?" "Yes." "Well, your mom wasn't entirely wrong." My blood iced. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He paused, choosing every word like it was a detonator he had to handle gently. "Your dad wasn't seeing another woman," he said. "And he wasn't having an affair. He was paying someone. Regularly. Consistently. In cash." "For what?" My voice came out thick, like my throat didn't want the answer. He swallowed. I heard it through the phone. "For information. About you." I blinked. "What information? About what?" "You," he repeated. "Your history. Your birth records. Your biological background. Everything." The breath left my lungs so fast I almost dropped the phone. "No," I whispered. "No. Daniel, I would know if something was wrong with my birth." He cut me off. "You were adopted," he said softly. "And your parents never told you." The world tilted sideways. "No," I said again, shaking my head even though he couldn't see. "No, Daniel, that's impossible." "It's not," he said. "I found out years ago, by accident, before I came out, before everything blew up. I overheard your parents fighting in the garage. Your mom was yelling that your dad was obsessed with the past, and that the agency said the file was closed for a reason." My heart pounded so loud I felt it in my teeth. "Why wouldn't they tell me?" I said. "Why hide something like that?" "Because," Daniel said, "your dad paid someone under the table to unseal part of your adoption records. That's what those coded meetings were about. He got them illegally." "Why?" I demanded. "Why would he need my records?" Daniel hesitated. "Because something came up in the old file. Something your dad didn't want your mom or you finding out. And when he saw your mom looking through his phone, he panicked. He hid everything. Then she assumed the worst." "What came up?" I asked. "Daniel, what was in the file?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "There was a note from the social worker. A name. Someone you were connected to. And your dad knew that if the truth got out, it would ruin him. Completely." My pulse hammered. "What name?" "You aren't going to believe it," he said. "Daniel, just tell me." Another beat. Another inhale. Then, "Your biological father is still alive. And your dad knows him." Everything inside me stilled. "He isn't just someone your dad knows," Daniel continued. "He's someone your dad has hated for decades. Someone from the church. Someone who left under suspicious circumstances. Someone who would absolutely talk if he ever found out your dad raised his child behind his back." My hands trembled. Who is he?" Daniel said the name, and I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some long-lost unknown. It was Pastor Graham, the former youth pastor who'd vanished when I was a kid. The same man my dad had publicly accused of moral failings before the church forced him out. My biological father was the man my dad got excommunicated because of something my dad did. And now that I was an adult, now that I was getting married, my dad thought the truth might surface. That's why they lost their minds. That's why the wedding terrified them. That's why they'd rather see me dead than walking toward a future they couldn't control. They thought I knew, but I didn't. Not until now. I don't think anything could have prepared me for the next part, Daniel said. Finding out I was adopted was one shock. Learning my biological father was a man my dad publicly destroyed was another. But the real reason behind everything was the part that hollowed me out. Daniel hesitated before speaking again. Like even he didn't want to say the words. You know how your dad always talked about Pastor Graham leaving because of moral failings? He asked. Yeah, I said slowly. He turned it into a whole sermon series. He lied, Daniel said. Your dad pushed him out, purposefully, aggressively, because Pastor Graham had started asking too many questions about something that happened around the time you were born. My chest tightened. What was he asking about? The adoption. Specifically, why your parents suddenly showed up with a newborn after your mom had claimed for years that she couldn't carry a pregnancy past the first trimester. My mouth went dry. Daniel kept going. Pastor Graham dug around. Quietly, and your dad found out. That's when the accusations started. Your dad rallied the church leadership, framed him, and made sure he was pushed out before he could find anything solid. I felt myself slowly sinking into the chair. And the messed up part? Daniel added. Pastor Graham didn't know he was your biological father. Not then. Not until your dad's meetings last year. What meetings? I whispered. The ones he was having with the guy who unsealed your records. It was like watching puzzle pieces lock into place against my will. Your dad found the name, Daniel said. He freaked. He realized Pastor Graham could blow up everything. Your dad's marriage, his reputation, his control over the family. If the truth got out, the church would have eaten him alive. He'd lose everything. And my mom? I asked. She didn't know? No, he said quietly. But she knew something was off. She thought he was cheating. She thought the woman was your age. She thought it was you because of how guilty he was acting. She thought you knew something because you started pulling away from the family. The timing lined up too perfectly. I rubbed my eyes hard. So instead of talking to me, they went full nuclear. They panicked, Daniel said. The wedding was their breaking point. Your dad was convinced Pastor Graham would show up. Or be found. Or that you'd somehow run into him. And if that happened, the truth comes out. So they wanted to stop the wedding, I said. More than that, Daniel said. They wanted to isolate you. Keep you close. Keep you dependent. Keep you afraid. Because once you're married, you build new family ties. New support. New people who might start asking questions. It hit me then, hard and cold. This whole time, they weren't terrified of me being gay. No, Daniel said. They were terrified of you finding out who you are. I felt something in my chest twist painfully. All those years of being controlled, shamed, manipulated. The emotional leash. The sermons. The fear. The constant monitoring. None of it had been about sin. Or purity. Or the image of a perfect family. It had been about one thing, ownership. My parents, especially my father, had built their entire identities around being unquestioned. Untouchable. They believed I was theirs to shape, theirs to silence, theirs to keep hidden if necessary. The truth wasn't just inconvenient. The truth was dangerous to them. So what were they planning to do? I asked quietly. If I hadn't sent those invitations? If I hadn't pushed back? Daniel's voice cracked. Not with emotion, but with the weight of knowing. They were going to sabotage the wedding, he said. And if that didn't work, they were planning a wellness hold. My blood ran cold. A what? A forced psychiatric evaluation, he said. Your dad was getting paperwork ready. He was preparing statements from relatives. They were going to claim you were unstable, unfit, confused. So you'd be held. So you'd miss the ceremony. So the wedding would fall apart. I felt my breath shorten. They were willing to have me institutionalized. I whispered. Yes, Daniel said. To keep the truth buried. That was the moment I stopped feeling fear. What replaced it was colder, cleaner, sharper, Revenge wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was a plan. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't fall apart the way I probably should have. When I hung up with Daniel, I sat there in absolute stillness, letting everything settle into its final shape. My parents weren't reacting out of shock or disappointment. They weren't struggling with my lifestyle. They weren't even afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing control, losing their facade, losing the lie they'd built their lives on. They were willing to sabotage my wedding, willing to frame me as unstable, willing to humiliate me publicly, willing to destroy Jenna, all to keep the truth buried. I wasn't just angry. I was done. The first step was calling Pastor Graham. Daniel got me his number. I was shaking when I dialed, not from fear, just from the weight of what I was about to do. When he answered, his voice was gentle, tired, older than I remembered. "This is strange to say," I told him, "but I think you're my biological father." Silence. A long, fragile silence. Then I heard him inhale sharply. "I always suspected," he whispered, "but I was never allowed to know." We talked for over an hour. He told me everything he knew from the adoption agency years ago, how he tried to get information but kept hitting walls, how he'd been pushed out of the church, how my father had threatened him legally and spiritually. Not for sin, not for moral failings, for proximity, for fear that the truth would surface. When I hung up, I wasn't scared anymore. I felt grounded, rooted, like the floor under me finally held. Then I executed the rest of the plan. I didn't confront my parents myself. No yelling, no fighting, no dramatic showdown. I let documentation do the talking. I forwarded everything I had. The unsealed adoption papers, the banking statements, the counseling center payments, the notes connecting Pastor Graham to me, the voicemail threats, the group chat messages, the planned psychiatric hold documents Daniel had found, straight to every elder at their church, to the board, to the administrative office, and to 2 former members who'd left because of my father's leadership. Then, because I knew my mother cared more about image than oxygen, I sent the same packet to every adult in the extended family, including the ones who'd gleefully mocked my engagement photo. And at the top of the email, I wrote, "Since you said you wanted to pray for me, here's something honest you can pray about." I didn't wait for responses. I picked up Jenna, drove 2 hours to her sister's place, and turned my phone off for a full day. When I turned it back on, it was chaos. "My mom, how could you do this? You ruined your father's life. You selfish girl. You destroyed your family." My dad didn't text. He sent a single voicemail he probably didn't know recorded 2 full minutes of him sobbing and swearing. And the church? They launched an internal investigation. My father stepped down, according to the official statement. Unofficially, he was forced out. Permanently, extended family members started jumping ship the second the documents circulated. Everyone who'd laughed at the memes was suddenly so sorry for misunderstanding. My cousin Lauren deleted her entire Instagram. My Uncle Gary tried to call me 6 times, then sent a long message blaming my father for misleading them. For the first time in my life, the monster who ruled my childhood faced consequences, and I didn't have to raise my voice once. Jenna and I got married in a small ceremony at Nay August Park. No drama, no explosions, no theatrics, just vows, just peace, just freedom. At the reception, her sister asked, "Do you think your parents will ever try to show up again?" I took Jenna's hand, looked around at the people we chose, the family we built, and said, "Not unless they want to watch me mail out another round of invitations." And damn, that line felt good.